Kenz?
No, Edward, don't leave!
What are you doing?
Oh, sorry, I was just...
You were watching Twilight.
I'm sorry.
You were supposed to be reading A Midsummer Night's Dream.
But they're basically the same thing.
How?
Well, for one, they both have supernatural elements.
Okay, but like...
And a relatively large cast of fun but relatively unimportant characters.
That's really a stretch.
And they both have love triangles.
I'm not going to win this argument, am I?
Nope.
Centuries before Stephanie Meyer, William Shakespeare was baptized in April 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, Wiltshire, England. Considered by many one of the greatest playwrights of all time, with 37 plays and 154 sonnets accredited to him, surprisingly few details about his life are known. He was a member of the acting troupe The Lord Chamberlain's Men, later renamed The King's Men. William Shakespeare died in April 1616. Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream was likely published in the winter of 1595. Some suggest that the piece was commissioned for performance at a noble wedding. However, there is no significant historical evidence in support of this theory. The play was first printed in 1600, and it was reissued in both 1619 and 1623 as a part of the notorious First Folio. Most modern publications of the play are based on the 1600 printing.
A Midsummer Night's Dream falls into a unique category of Shakespearean works alongside The Tempest and Love's Labour's Lost. Unlike most of Shakespeare's works, the plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream cannot be traced back to any specific piece of source material. The only direct parallel to a previous piece of work is found in the show's Play Within a Play, Pyramus and Thisbe, which draws on characters found in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Aside from that relatively brief section of the play, the piece has ties back to a wide melange of English tradition, including historic, folkloric, and completely new characters.
Though A Midsummer Night's Dream is often cited as one of Shakespeare's most popular and often performed plays, many scholars debate the merit of its modern interpretations. Shakespeare scholar Roger Bloom calls the play one of the most distorted and recent stagings that he has ever experienced.
The show starts with Theseus, the Duke of Athens, planning his marriage to Hippolyta, the Queen of the Amazons. Aegeus arrives asking the Duke to settle a dispute between him and his daughter.
Aegeus' daughter, Hermia, is in love with Lysander, and Lysander loves her in return. However, Demetrius is also in love with Hermia. To make matters worse, Helena, Hermia's best friend and Demetrius' ex-lover, is madly in love with Demetrius. To recap, Hermia and Lysander are in love, Demetrius loves Hermia, and Helena loves Demetrius.
Meanwhile, in the forest outside of the city, there is another quarrel occurring. The fairy queen Titania and her husband, the fairy king Oberon, are in the midst of a tumultuous lover's spat. Robin Goodfellow, also known as Puck, is Oberon's right-hand man and a trickster fairy. He will be important later.
Also in the woods are Nick Bottom and his crew of mechanicals. Nick Bottom is an egocentric weaver who craves attention. The mechanicals are an assortment of craftsmen from Athens who have gathered to put together a play to perform at the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta.
That's a lot of characters.
I know, right? Let's get back to the story.
The play starts with Theseus, the Duke of Athens.
You already did that part.
Oh, right.
So Aegeus is angry because his daughter Hermia wants to marry Lysander and refuses to wed his preferred man, Demetrius. Theseus tells Hermia that if she does not do as her father says, she will be given the choice between execution and becoming a nun.
Hermia is not happy with this decision, so she and Lysander decide to elope. They plan to run away that night to the home of Lysander's elderly aunt. While they are talking, Helena enters the room.
Reminder, Helena is Hermia's best friend from childhood and Demetrius' ex-lover.
Right. Helena enters the room and Hermia and Lysander tell her their plan and wish her luck with Demetrius.
As they leave, Helena comes up with a plan of her own. If she tells Demetrius about Hermia and Lysander's elopement, he is sure to go after them. If she follows him into the woods, she believes it will be the perfect opportunity to win back Demetrius' love.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's true love. It doesn't have to make sense.
Sure.
Anyway, while all this is happening, another group of Athenians are gathered in the woods outside of the city. Nick Bottom and the other mechanicals are beginning rehearsals for their play,
which they plan to perform at the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta.
Right, they're planning on putting on a version of Pyramus and Thisbe.
Which is ironic, because Pyramus and Thisbe is an earlier play that might have provided source material for another Shakespearean work, Romeo and Juliet.
Stop interrupting.
The mechanicals are assigned parts in the play, though Nick Bottom would like to play all the roles. After making a few script adjustments, the group disbands,
Agreeing to reunite the next night to rehearse.
Meanwhile, in the woods.
Busy place.
Now who's interrupting?
Meanwhile, in the forest, Fairy Queen and King Titania and Oberon are in the midst of a fierce lovers' quarrel. One of Titania's handmaids recently died in childbirth. Titania wishes to raise the child as her own, but Oberon would like to have the child as one of his henchmen. Their quarrel is so fierce that it is affecting the weather around them.
When Titania leaves, Oberon and his right-hand man, Puck, come up with a plan of their own. Oberon sends Puck to find a magical flower. The juice of the flower, when rubbed on a person's eyes, causes the person to fall in love with the next thing that they see. Oberon plans to use the juice on Titania to make her fall in love with something monstrous.
While in the woods, Oberon runs into Helena and Demetrius, who are searching for Hermia and Lysander. Much to Helena's dismay, her plan to win back Demetrius is not going quite as well as she might have hoped.
Now there's a shock. Up.
So Demetrius tells Helena to leave him alone, but Helena refuses. Oberon overhears all of this and takes pity on Helena. He instructs Puck to find Demetrius and use the flower's juice to make him fall in love with Helena.
While Oberon enchants Titania with the flower, Lysander and Hermia find themselves lost in the woods. They settle down to sleep for the night, and Puck enters. Mistaking Lysander for Demetrius, he enchants Lysander with the flower.
Meanwhile, the Mechanicals have gathered for their rehearsal. Nick Bottom is waiting in the bushes for his entrance when Puck spots him. Amused by Nick's overdramatic and inane antics, Puck decides Nick Bottom is the perfect creature for Titania, the Fairy Queen, to fall in love with. Puck enchants Nick Bottom, giving him the head of a donkey. Upon seeing him, the rest of the Mechanicals flee in terror.
Alone and lost, Nick Bottom wanders through the woods, where he stumbles upon the sleeping Titania. Titania awakens, and thanks to the flower's magic, falls instantly in love with him.
At the same time, Helena, abandoned by Demetrius, has stumbled upon the sleeping Lysander, who wakes up and is instantly in love. Helena, assuming Lysander is mocking her, runs off. He follows, leaving Hermia sleeping alone. Oberon realizes a mistake has been made and sends Puck to fix it. Puck finds Demetrius, who is also asleep, and enchants him as well. Running away from Lysander, Helena stumbles upon Demetrius, who wakes up and falls in love with her as well.
So, quick recap. Lysander and Hermia are in love. Demetrius was in love with Hermia, and Helena was in love with Demetrius. Now, Lysander and Demetrius are both in love with Helena, who thinks the three of them are mocking her in some complex prank. Hermia is left alone and very confused.
That's insane!
I know. Let's check in and see how they're handling it. Oh, me! You juggler! You canker blossom! You thief of love! What? Have you come through the night to steal my love's heart from him?
Fie! Have you no modesty, no maiden shame, no touch of bashfulness? What would you tear impatient answers from my tongue? Fie, you counterfeit, you puppet, you!
Puppet? Ay, me! That be the game! I perceive that she hath made me compare our statures. She urged her height. With her personage, her tall personage, I prevail with. Has she prevailed with him? Are you in such high esteem? Because I am so dwarfish and so low? How low am I, you painted maypole? How low am I? Can I not reach thine eyes?
Pray you, though you mock me, gentlemen, let her not hurt me. I have no talent for shrewishness, I am a right maid in my cowardice. Let her not strike me. You may think because she is something lower than myself, that I can match her.
Lower? Hark again!
Good Hermia, be not bitter with me. I have loved you evermore, Hermia, always kept your counsel and your confidence, never wronged you except that in love to Demetrius, I told him of your flight up to this wood. He followed you, and in love for him, I followed him. But he hath chid me hence, hath threatened me to strike me, spurn me, nay, to kill me. But now you will let me quiet go. I will bear my folly back to Athens and follow you no further. Let me go. You see how simple and how fond I am.
Why don't you be gone, then? What has told you back?
A foolish heart, which I leave here behind.
With Lysander?
With Demetrius! Oh, when she is angry, she is keen and shrewd. She was a vixen in school, and though she be but little, she is fierce.
Little! Nothing but low and little! Why will you suffer her to clout me thus? Let me come at her!
I will trust you no longer, and I longer in this place. Your hands are quicker than mine in a fray, but my legs are longer to run away.
I am amazed and know not what to say.
So anyway, after this happens, Lysander challenges Demetrius to a duel to prove who is most worthy of Helena's love. To stop the boys from killing each other, Puck leads them on a wild chase through the forest, using his magic to distract and confuse them until finally all four lovers fall asleep once more. Puck uses a different potion to undo the charm placed on Lysander, returning him to his normal state.
Meanwhile, Titania dotes in adoration upon Nick Bottom,
Who is still cursed with the head of a donkey.
all to the great amusement of Oberon and Puck. The two soon decide that enough is enough and undo the enchantments placed on both Titania and Nick Bottom. Titania wakes, and she and Oberon resolve their differences and leave together.
In another part of the forest, Theseus, Hippolyta, and Aegeus, remember them? Stumble upon the four sleeping youths. Upon awakening, the lovers remember nothing of the night before. Lysander and Hermia reaffirm their love for each other, and Demetrius professes his love for Helen. Remember, at this point, Demetrius is the only one still under magical influence.
Morning at last. The assembled company leaves the forest. All three couples, Theseus and Hippolyta, Lysander and Hermia, and Helena and Demetrius, are wed.
And they all lived happily ever... What?
You forgot about the mechanicals.
Oh, right. The mechanicals have regrouped in the woods.
Having heard the news of the triple wedding, the mechanicals begin to panic. They had planned to put on their play for the Duke and his wedding party, but they are lost without their star. Right on cue, Nick Bottom appears, disenchanted and ready to perform.
Although the play itself is far from spectacular, the wedding party derives great amusement from the antics of the mechanicals, and the play is well received overall.
After a dance, the assembled persons depart for the night.
Once they have left, the fairies enter the palace. Oberon and Titania place a blessing upon the palace and all of its occupants, and Puck gives his famed final address to the audience.
Shakespearean scholar Dr. Harold Bloom says of A Midsummer Night's Dream,
Nothing by Shakespeare before A Midsummer Night's Dream is its equal, and in some respects nothing by him afterward surpasses it, and it is his first undoubted masterwork, without flaw, and one of his dozen or so plays of overwhelming originality and power.
Bloom highlights many themes of his play in his book, Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. One of the themes discussed is what Bloom refers to as the arbitrary nature of love. Bloom points out that within the text, there is very little quantifiable difference between the characters of Demetrius and Lysander. Therefore, Helena's and Hermia's respective preferences transcend reason and become something more whimsical and intangible.
Side note, some critics suggest that the reason this play lacks significant plot structure and character development is due to its lack of immediate source material. For all of Shakespeare's gifts, it is possible that originality is really not one of them. C.L. Barber, author of Shakespeare's festive comedies, argues a similar sentiment regarding the impersonal nature of love expressed in the play. He discusses the generalization of love in comedies as opposed to the intimacy of tragic love. In works such as A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare highlights both the beauties and fallacies of love in a generalized manner that could apply to any person in any situation. In this way, Shakespeare discusses love as an aspect of humanity available to and present in every man, not just in the superhuman deified heroes of his tragedies.
Literary critic G.K. Chesterton focuses less on the themes of love in the play, choosing instead to underline the theme of illusion versus reality. Chesterton indicates that Shakespeare's fantasy includes all of the typical and familiar elements of a dream, including the pursuit of the man we cannot catch, the flight from the man we cannot see, the perpetual returning to the same place, the crazy alteration in the very objects of our desire, the substitution of one face for another face, the putting of the wrong souls in the wrong bodies, the fantastic disloyalties of the night. He highlights the juxtaposition of the dream versus the reality of the characters in the play, as represented by Puck's final monologue, in which he suggests the entire play itself was but a dream of the audience members.
Dr. Harold Bloom further elucidates this concept of illusion and reality in his discussion of the play. However, Bloom chooses to vest the manifestation of this theme in the character of Nick Bottom rather than Chesterton's Puck. At the start of the play, Bloom argues that Nick Bottom represents the everyman stereotype in his role at the start of the play. Bottom is characterized by an ever-present optimism and self-assuredness that provides a generalization of the human spirit. According to Bloom, Bottom is at once a sublime clown and a great visionary, equally at home amongst his rude mechanicals and in the court of the Fairy Queen herself. Thus, Bottom provides a link between the world of the dream and the world of reality.
Finally, both Bloom and Chesterton present arguments portraying the entire work as an allegorical representation of Old England. This can be seen in the folkloric story of the fairies and in the historical characters characters of the rude mechanicals, both characterizations that harken back to the traditions of Chesterton's merry old England.
Bloom also suggests that the magical flower, love and idleness, could have some parallel to the beloved Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. The fair vestal throned by the west that repels Cupid's arrow is Queen Elizabeth. It is her commitment that sends the arrow flying astray, eventually hitting the flower and imbuing it with its magical properties.
Okay, but do people actually like the play?
Well,
A Midsummer Night's Dream is consistently ranked not only as one of Shakespeare's most colloquially popular works, it is also fairly beloved by scholars and critics around the world. Dr. Harold Bloom calls the play a masterwork, and G.K. Chesterton refers to it as the greatest of Shakespeare's comedies and, also, from a certain point of view, the greatest of his plays.
That's great and all, but what do you think?
one of the most commonly received negative critiques of this show revolves around its lack of definitive plot structure, character development, or a true climax. However, in my opinion, this ambiguity about the plot actually adds to the dreamlike quality of the show as a whole. In addition, it is my opinion that the themes of this show, including the arbitrary, ambiguous nature of love and the contrast between dream and reality, are much more grounded and relatable than some of the lofty ideals of true love and destiny and the constant struggle for power espoused in some of Shakespeare's most famous works, such as Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet. Therefore, this is one of my personal favorite pieces.
However, not everyone watching the show is going to be some crazy academic scholar. Shakespeare applies to people of all walks of life, including his crazy plot twists and mistaken identities and just general chaos of the show. Anybody can come expecting a good laugh. That's what makes Shakespeare a genius, because his show applies to everyone, not just the crazy academic scholars. Just like Twilight!